my own journey started after I left Washington, came to California, and I began to experience the Shekhinah in the ocean and in the hills and in the water. And I didn't have a frame of reference. I had an extraordinarily good Jewish education. I was tutored by my grandfather from the time I was 3 years old. My uncles in their 90s say that I could quote Rashi by the time I was 7, though I doubt it. And I went to Herzliya Hebrew High School. I studied Hebrew as a modern language in university. But I was longing for the Shekhinah and didn't know that she was our ethno-particular mother goddess. So I went on this journey, and my journey was really into the past. And that's why this opportunity to talk about the future is so special, because I've spent the last 15 or 20 years trying to identify in our literature, in our culture, in our religious rituals, how we retained the memory of God the Mother. And we've retained that memory in very subtle and what we might call post-pagan forms. Although the great Raphael Patai reminded us of how those were rooted in the pagan forms. In order for us to make this shift that Reb Zalman has laid out so beautifully, I felt we have to briefly remember where we came from. That we have loved and protected and preserved this particular variation on the divine feminine, and we've given it a conceptual framework in every era, in the Torah through nature, especially in Shemot, in the Talmud through ethics. You know, you give the beggar prutah, the Shekhinah will rest on you. You study with 10 Jews, and the Shekhinah will hover over you. You go into the synagogue, and you may hear the bells and the fluttering of Kanfei HaShekhinah. And those formulations evolved and continued. So for the Yehudei Ashkenaz, the pietists, for Reb Yehuda HaNasi, HaChassid, and Rabbi Eliezer of Worms, the Shekhinah was the kavod, the glory, the light, the prayer. And for the authors of the Zohar, began to engender the Shekhinah, because we started from Onkelos in the 2nd century with a concept that was meant to avoid anthropomorphism. And finally, with the Zohar and beyond into Luria, we have the engendering of the Shekhinah and the welcoming of the Shekhinah as Shabbat HaMalkah. And that beauty carries us, after the Inquisition, after Shabtai Tzvi. It sustains us. We need a mother, a universal mother. And the Hasidim of Eastern Europe, who so many of us, including Reb Zalman, feel so powerfully, they tried to bring Shekhinah back to the earth through music and dance and love. The great Maggid of Mezrich, says, when you're davening, you need to be davening to bring the Shekhinah back to the earth. Forget about your individual bakashot. So every generation, the Zionists wanted to bring the Shekhinah back through doing agriculture in Eretz Yisrael. And we who are part of the New World, particularly the Americas, for us, the Shekhinah has been the voice of women and the emergence of women rabbis and cantors and so on. So every generation we've had a concept. And now we're at a point where we need to go beyond the concept. Because now the Shekhinah is already the planetary Gaia, and I believe the source of what I would call intergalactic connectedness. Not just connectedness between people and animals and other life forms, but between the galaxies. So I believe that the future of Shekhinah consciousness is as mother to the entire cosmos. And just as Reb Zalman outlined it to us as Ema Eloha, I would call her now Em Kol HaOlamim. She is the mother of all the worlds, all the worlds you can imagine, right? The astral, the etheric, way beyond, the throne world, etc. So I asked myself, in this world that is within and beyond Bina, what would the simplest Shekhinah theology look like? So here is my very simplistic formulation. The first, universal awareness of the divinity in all beings that elicits the tenderness, respect, love, and caring that we associate with both human parenting and the Divine Mother. And we have to think about who are our models for that.
Could you please read that?
I'll read it again. Universal awareness of the divinity in all beings that elicits the tenderness, respect, love, and caring that we associate with the Divine Mother, with unconditional love. And as an aside, for myself, that experience for me has been around the Hindu mothers. Amachi, Karuna, Ma'i, Shalandaman. I'll return to that later of where do we go for the modeling. The second component in this simplistic theology, widespread experience of the holiness of all the earth, the Gaia, which would make it impossible to pollute, destroy, or exploit this planet or others. Okay? Should I repeat that one? You got it.
Yes.
Okay. Widespread experience of the holiness of all the earth, which would make it impossible to pollute, destroy, or exploit this planet or others. Now this is Zman HaMashiach, obviously. And such a messianic era will require the unification of consciousness across all geographical boundaries, genders, sexual preference, ethnic identity, religion, etc., etc. It is a collective awareness based on the unity of all beings in the source. And if we had that consciousness, it would foster respect and love for the beauty of differences. Because what does the Shekhinah produce? Varied human beings. God has created a very diverse planet and a very diverse star system and very diverse galaxies. And that would allow humanity, of which we are a part, to finally enjoy real mutual tolerance. We have worked, many of us, towards that state through political and social action. We know at the same time that its ultimate victory, to really be in Netzach here, depends on both the shift in consciousness and the action that comes from that new thought. The challenge as I see it is that we are still in the process of developing Gaia consciousness. Now, Reb Zalman has reminded us many times that the process of developing Gaia consciousness was given a jump start by the moon landing and the space programs, both here in the Soviet Union. And those enabled us to begin to perceive our planet as a living, vibrating organism. But it has not yet translated into committed international protection of the environment or the election of political leaders with those priorities. And I can say, having traveled a fair amount, there are very few countries where we see leaders really with that commitment. Also, the development of the computer and its byproducts of the internet and the email have enabled people all over the world to access technology rapidly and enjoy almost instantaneous contact with each other. I often have the experience that the Shekhinah is between myself and all of you on the email. And those developments, which have great potential for international networking, we know that we can call meditation breaks and all kinds of wonderful actions in that way. And we're getting a huge amount of information. But Shia last night was talking about how we have information, but we lack wisdom. And I would say that we're lacking the filters in the internet for real enlightened chokhmah. That's what we still need. So we are still going to rely on you, on the healers and the teachers, the writers, the musicians, the poets, the spiritual leaders, because the new thinking has to come from you. And also I feel there's another dimension, and that is the one of how do we share our own experiences of illuminated states to other people. You know, in Yiddishkeit, it's been kind of a no-no, right? If you go up and you have that experience in the Pardes, unless you're a great tzaddik, you're not supposed to talk about it. You know, and who knows what might happen to you on the way. So I think for a lot of us who go into visionary states, a lot of the people who are our greatest visionaries remain hidden. And that's true certainly in Israel, but I think here too, a lot of people are really afraid to come out. And I feel part of what's happened in this generation is we've finally taken the Shekhinah out of the ark. We have had this incredible divine visitor, and she's been traveling incognito with us for thousands of years. And we're finally letting her out. So the same thing, I think, applies to people who have significant experiences of the divine, because what we are going towards, I believe, is the widespread experience of the presence of God on this earth, in this life, and in these bodies. That is how we're going to go towards the Shekhinah future, not through the denial of the body or an ascent only upward. So, how do I think all this could happen or is happening? So I want to share with you a little bit of my own imaginal world and some of that of my teacher, Ellen Kaufman-Dosick. I feel that other visionaries more developed than myself have seen this, and I, in my own way, experienced this. And what I experience is a parallel scenario in which the great beings of all the religions are now being returned to the planet. Some as new infants, and you've seen enough of those Shekhinah babies to know there's some beings coming that are not carrying all the baggage we carried. And some of it in the form of mature beings who will come as soul mergers, what some people call walk-ins. And I believe that our cooperation with them could produce a spiritual epiphany on this earth, a more rapid enlightenment process or more universal enlightenment process. I don't think it'll happen overnight, but I think it could speed up our ability to enter into that state of harmony that we're always davening about. B'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shmo echad. What are we really talking about? We're talking about a time when the whole world will know God. You may remember there's these stories of the Baal Shem Tov always wanting to bring the Mashiach, and something always happens to turn him off course. And then there's one story where he's talking to the Mashiach, and he says, when, Matai Tavo, when are you coming? And the Mashiach answers, and I'm paraphrasing, saying, when everybody on earth gets it the way you do, can do what you do, understand what you understand. So how are we going to get there? I think sometimes that we are like the Exodus generation. We're stuck in Egypt, and we have forgotten that we really must cry out to God and ask for help. We've become so sophisticated that we don't talk anymore about the intervention of God in history. That's in the past. That's Mount Sinai. So for me, there's a need for another intervention. And I mean it really in the terms that the addiction people used. I watched an interview with Betty Ford the other day describing her family's intervention in her alcoholism. And I thought, we need an intervention from on high because we're still not getting it, what we're doing to this planet. And we also have, for those who don't like the intervention model, we always have the study model and the tutoring model, because how I see it is even if all these great beings arrive tomorrow morning, you're going to have to be the tutors. You're going to have to train the children and the grandchildren. You're going to have to be doing the work to put it all in place. But you can always go back to the literature, because the literature is replete with the most poetic descriptions of that time in the future when all people will come to worship at God's holy mountain. And our mystical literature is so rich with understanding of altered states and the human capacity to reach the divine. So the third component for me, or maybe it's the fourth, of this Shekhinah future is the teaching of our mystical tradition to everyone. When people ask me about Reb Zalman, especially my non-Jewish friends who've not met him or seen him on the video, and they say, what is the contribution of your teacher? You know, so I can talk about he found us, he trained us, he turned us on. But when I think about it, I say, well, his contribution has been to open the gates to the study of Jewish mysticism, not only to all of us, including women, but to everybody. And, you know, right now, Kabbalah is kind of a fad, you might say. But if you think about the future, we have to be ready to share the wisdom that we have. The pre-modern writings are very burdened with the goal of assuring the Jewish future and the unique place of Klal Yisrael in the redemption. So not only is the Shekhinah our ethno-particular mother, but if you look at the Zohar on Parshat V'Yachid this week, it will tell you that it's only Klal Yisrael that's going to participate in the Geula, in the redemption. So we have to be ready to sort out the xenophobia. We've already done a lot of that cleanup work on how we teach Torah. And I think a lot of us do it in how we teach the metaphor of Zohar. But I think it's part of cleansing our collective psyche in order to pass on the wisdom, not only to the Jewish generations, but to the others. And I think what it requires is relinquishing what I call our favorite child status. You know how there used to be a favorite nation? The senator from Washington, I remember, we had these treaties, you know, about countries that got special privileges in trade with the United States. And I think giving that up would liberate us. Because in the old scheme of things, we were responsible for everything. Because of our sins, our mother was exiled. And if we say, as the Baal Shem said, the Shekinah is made up of the limbs of all the Jewish people, then if any of us falls by the wayside, we are destroying the body of the Gaia. So we have to look at the body of the Gaia as being made up of all the beings, not just the Jews. And I think that shift is a thinking shift, a language shift, and it's also a shift about how we think about the earth and the land of Israel. Because right now we're in a time of such major challenge to the health of the whole planet that we need the larger view. To see the whole earth as holy, all the residents of earth as children of Shekhinah, and to acknowledge, as Reb Zalman already pointed out, that the Holy Mother must hover over all places of worship, all study groups, and all good deeds, not just those of Jews. One of the questions I want to end with for Reb Zalman and for all of you is the question of whose responsibility is it to work on this material, to bring it forward differently, to promote it ecumenically. I was invited a few months ago to speak in India at an interfaith conference about not only divine feminine in Judaism, but what our concepts are in Judaism of tolerance that could lead to peace in the world. And I spoke to 100,000 people, which was kind of mind-blowing. And there were these amazing teachers from all over the world representing all different spiritual paths. And I was very honored and a bit awed to do that work. But I've really thought about this, like, how is this shift going to take place? Who are the facilitators? What is our role in the ecumenical exchange towards that, real theology of the future? And can we move ahead now without teaching the Jewish people about the Shekhinah? I mean, I've spent at least 15 years, maybe 20, traveling around the country and doing workshops and talks and so on. And it's still really amazing to me how many groups I go into where it's brand new. So the question, I think, is we're going to take the bride to the chuppah. The kala is going to go whether we're ready or not. So the question is, if we're the mothers and the fathers of the bride, will we bring the kala to the chuppah of the future? Thank you.
ברוכה את השכינה, אשר חלקה לחוכמתה לחושבי שמה. Oh, so many wonderful things here. When you were talking about the diversity, I like to say to people, you know, there's universe. Uni is Kutchabrich and verse is Shekhinah. You know, two polarities. And they're both at home. You know, polarities, you can never separate them. You know, cut off the North Pole from the South Pole of a magnet. It always remains there. The walk-ins. At the end of chapter 14 in the Tanya, he says that sometimes it happens that a person is gifted with an ibur of a ruach of Ezet Tzaddik, you know, and this is what we try and do when we celebrate the yahrzeit. On Sunday was the yahrzeit of Reb Nosson, the scribe of Reb Nachman. And you get the sense that you want to make a kind of yichud with those neshamas and allow them to walk into you. How could we do this more consciously? There was a wonderful psychologist by the name of George Kelly. I don't know if any of you read his material. And George Kelly talks about fixed role therapy. That sometimes you play a particular role, it's not your way of being, but it shakes up your habit system so that you can become more labile to be as you need to be in the present. And I have a feeling that if, and this is what I tried to do, by the way, look at the walk-ins on that CD that Reb Marsha made available where I do the davening Rebbes. And you get a sense of the walk-ins at that point. And by making yourself accessible, today I'm going to keep company with Reb so-and-so. And I wish, you know, and you have done this remarkable stuff of giving us the yahrzeit of Dolce of Worms and all these wonderful, wonderful Malka bells. Oi, okay. When you were talking about what our responsibility ought to be in terms of chinuch, for years I've been saying that to people at Cage and other things that we need to devise a curriculum for creating the Lamed Vovnikas of the future. And I think the Jewish education has suffered from not thinking daringly enough about creating those curricula for the saints that we need in the future, because we will have to teach them. And it's not only information, it is formation, as spiritual directors talk about formation of a person. And I just want to say one more thing here, and then have you say something. Art Green points out that a lot of the stuff in the Zohar on Shekhinah could be seen as our counter statement for Mariology. There was, you know, if you have a sense of how Mary figured in the lives of people, you know, that joke is going about this Italian lady, she is pouring out her heart in front of a statue of Mary, and this guy is making a priest who doesn't like that Mariology so much, stands behind the crucifix and he says, "You should be talking to me, you should be talking to me." And she says, "Shut up, Junior, I'm talking to your mother." The sense that we all want to talk to the mother.
So take these sort of in order. One on Ibor. When I was doing the work on Reb Tzalman belts, I was of course reading much of the Belzer Rebbe's material, Dover Shalom and biographies and so on. And there was a story where his brother comes to him when he's already a mature Rav and a genius, you know. And he says, "You know, I really don't understand." He says, "You weren't such great sheikhs as a kid. You weren't so from, you didn't know so much." And the Belzer tells him that during his bar mitzvah, he experienced one of their ancestors and it was actually Reb Eliezer from Amsterdam entering him. And that was from that day forward that he felt he had real wisdom. Most of us who have had any kind of experience of Ibor don't talk about it. Or we find somebody who lives far away. I remember going up to visit Monique Pasternak above Mendocino and having these experiences, myself and Keith and Monique around their Shabbos table. And like they were the kind of people that were so far out, so trippy, I could tell them, right? But in a practical sense, part of the work I've done over the years has been to try to find yurtzites and birth dates of women saints, and to put those out in the email and ask people to meditate simultaneously. So I try to, adjust California time with your time, wherever you are, so that we would bring them in. And I've had, phenomenal experiences and feedback. Reb Ela and Shana and others who've been on the network would also tell me what their experiences were. And I've had people in my home community, both Jewish and otherwise, participate with me. So that's been very rich kind of experience. And then done some very specific work with Ellen around trying to bring these women in. But Eli and Lori and some of my other students from Santa Cruz who are here participated in creating a performance piece that we call the Peaceful Maccabee. That's about Shlomtzi and Hamalka and 8 other women. It's now available on video. And in that process, each of these students who had been in classes with me for about a year took a character and wrote a script in which they became that person. And it was really remarkable because none of them were professional actors. In fact, the one professional actress on the video is really poor. She was a stand-in for somebody who got, who just couldn't stay with the process because there were rehearsals and so on. So I think that using that process of yurtzeit and birth dates, and now our finding the cover of the Betula, all of these will help. But what we really need is students who are serious about this material. And I say to you really in all love that the material that I work with is still not being taught to our rabbinical students or the AJR rabbinical students or the, a little bit I'd say more in the Reconstructionist seminary. And the more, traditional seminaries don't even have the scholars who are focused on these people. And it's not straight scholarship, it's detective work. You go through piles of books till you find one little thing. So I'd say more people being involved would certainly help. Go ahead.
I once had a student who had to go and see the dean of medical school. He had a MA in biology and was doing some very fine research, but wanted to be a doctor. So we rehearsed his talk with the dean. And he started to cry. I want to help real people and not test tubes, So he learned to say, we worked it through back and forth, you see, sir, my ambitions lie more in the interactive social field than the reason why I'm saying this, there are some people who don't want to hear about walk-ins and that kind of language. You can say, you see, it is very important that we should be able to boot the mind software of Malka of Bells.
I taught for many years at the University of California, Berkeley. I taught public policy, and I'm addicted to data and footnotes. But when I worked with finding the material on the women, it was like detective work and intuition. I'd also like to address the question of the Lamed Vav of the future, because a lot of them are already here. And my buddy Amitai, who didn't speak yesterday, is here today because he represents to me that person of the future already. And part of it is who he is, and part of it is the parents that he has. I remember when Nadja first told me about taking Ricky with her, when someone was dying in Southern California, and Ricky is in the room talking to the person who's exiting, my mind was blown. I wouldn't have even dreamt of doing that with my children. But, so Amitai and Ricky and the older boys too have already, been part of our chevra and have these extraordinary parents who foster that maturity. And I understand Reb Zalman has given Amitai Magid Smicha, Junior Magid, right? So, and a lot of people are just getting it, you know, straight from the womb. So Reb Eila's little boy, Shlomo Chaim Lev Simcha Devir Yerushalayim, and I really wanted her to call him Devir, because he's got, you know, African, Native American kind of energy. We were all at his mikvah for conversion on his Brit Milah, right? Yitz and Reb David Oliver Shalom and Aryeh. We had so many rabbis there, Gevalt and cantors. And you know, this kid is like a drummer and a davener from birth. And Ayla said a few years ago that as he gets a little older, she's going to send him around to various people in this chevra to spend time with, you know? That's part of how I see the Lamed Vav of the future, that we will have more collective parenting, the way Bert brought up Benji in Berkeley, you know, of a kid who has parents but also lives with his teachers, which is what we did in the ancient past. And I think of Sam Neidorf, who was born 9 months to the day from when we blessed his parents under Chopet Ruach Haaretz. They've been having fertility problems. And this kid sat through every meeting, and when he'd see that somebody was having a hard time, he'd come over and he would embrace them and talk sweetly to them. You know, he was like a miracle. He's becoming more of a normal child now, unfortunately. But I have many of these children who are the candidates for the Lamed Vav of the future. One was a new baby that was brought in here last night, and Rebbe did the Brit Milah, and the parents are people that I've worked with from Sedona and so on. There are many children like this in our network. There's Naomi, Hannah, you know, in Taos, who is a child of the renewal movement. And Zareya, her new baby, I haven't seen yet. And we got Rosalind and people like that who, you know, in very short period of time, as God counts time, have, you know, organized their life, gone to Israel, gotten smicha, gotten married, found partners. There's extraordinary happenings and miracles all around us. So I think that I could make a list of 36 very easily.
I just want to say one more thing here. I see the people who are here from Israel, Reb Ohad, Reb Gabriel, Reb Mordechai, and I want to say that we would be so happy, and Reb Ruth, of course, Harav Ruth, yeah. Well, she's got to be here. All right. But I want to say first that I would like to see some of the people who have these wonderful sensitivities to do the kind of job that was done around the time of the Riyah Kodesh, where some people would be walking around and they would say, this is where Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel is. This is where so-and-so was buried. And they did all this for the male tzaddikim. And I hope that beginning with Chana Rochel at this point, we will be able to find some others that we haven't yet learned about. And that we will hear psulas tovis from the way in which the curricula are being done by the indigenous people of Amirim and others who are celebrating in Eretz Yisrael from that place that comes from earth, and where the Shekhinah is doing the kind of teaching that doesn't have to go through the filters of American spam.
I wanted to add that I was very privileged also this fall to spend time in Israel, and I was with Rabbi Ohad and his chevra for Yom Kippur in the Dead Sea, and I was just surrounded by people doing ecological work and feminist work, reconciliation between Arabs and Israelis, all kinds of peace groups, sustainable agriculture. It was mind-blowing. And of course our friend Eliyahu Klein doing the hug around the lake in Tiberias and escorting a group of Sufis. And then I was with Rabbi Joe and Rolinda in Jerusalem for Sukkot with my family for a while, and then up north with Reb Gafni at something that Israelis call a meditation retreat, which for us would have been like country fair, a carnival on the ocean, the former Club Med. And Mordechai, had the courage to do Simchas Torah there, and it was really phenomenal. Gabby was there playing music, and a lot of people from Sheva. But the beauty of the celebration, of such joy, and of course it's easy to be joyous when you're up in Rosh Hashanah on the ocean, but the dance and the music, the meditation, the tefillah, I came home much more hopeful. Much more so than I am here watching the CNN, because I was constantly surrounded by people who have emunah somehow in the future and are doing the work, and Gabby's doing the Sulha work and bringing it here. And, I went to my family, which is the great mixture from the most Chilyoni to the most Haredi, and we had a marvelous bar mitzvah, and everybody was really more up than I expected. I think part of it is it was Sukkot, and people were out, and there were sukkahs everywhere, but seriously, I think that we have to really be mindful of the level of Shekhinah energy that is still present in Eretz Yisrael. And really, at an event that Michael's group, I think, or somebody else in Berkeley, Chachmat Halev organized, Shlomo Bar came to sing with Habrera HaTVA. And I go into this space when they sing, where I'm in Jerusalem in the future, I'm there with everybody, all my family, all my friends, and everyone's dancing in the street. And I think we've taken down the mechitza too. And when I shared this with Shlomo at the reception afterwards, he really cried. And I said, it is that vision that I live in a big chunk of the time. And I ran into some friends from Beit Tikkun who, think I'm crazy, some of the time, at least. And I said, we're going to have to hold multiple realities now. The blissful vision, the ecstasy, and the horror that's happening now. We're going to have to hold it all, and we're going to have to be very strong. And, for some of us, the strength is in the lineage that we study, the tradition that we hold. For other people, it's more generic, more ecumenical. But however it is, it's like the focus on health and happiness and love and belief in people and in the future. And really, I came back from Israel very strengthened. And I have 5 Israeli grandchildren. The oldest is going, for either army or alternative service next year. And like when I'm here, I'm concerned. And there I'm concerned, but in a different way. I felt much more hopeful.
Amen.
Get up and find your places.